It's always a good afternoon and great company. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand on CJAD 800.
Welcome back. So, by the way, we are on thunderstorm watch. We spoke to someone from Environment Canada off the top of the show. We're told that around 4 o'clock, things may get a little nasty. This is moving apparently this way from Ottawa. There's a possibility of hail. What did he describe it as? Like toonie-sized hail, if we actually get that. So it could get a little nasty out there. But again, later in the afternoon, I'm going to keep updating our Environment Canada site. For right now, it still shows it as it's a yellow watch, severe thunderstorm. But as I said, there might be, I think you used the word tornado in there as well, depending on whether this picks up or not. So just keep that in mind. That's supposed to happen later in the afternoon if it happens. Now, earlier today, and I actually read this piece in the Gazette on Saturday. So Robert Libman, of course, a former Equality Party leader, who is a regular commentator, also writes a column for the Gazette, I think a weekly column now. I've had him on the show a couple of times. But he wrote a column on Saturday dealing with Quebec politics and something that's happened just over the past couple of weeks, from what I understand. The idea being that now, Charles Milliard, and I'm going to just focus on the Liberals as far as this one is concerned, although the PQ have done this as well. They've named somewhat of what we call star candidates, right? You may have heard, if you're listening to CJD, James Hughes from the Old Brewery Mission, regular here in the station. He is now going to be running for the provincial Liberals in the upcoming election. Very well-known person, someone who's done tremendous work, obviously working with the homeless in this city. Beyond that, Michel Leblanc, who has been the head of our Montreal Chamber of Commerce for many, many years, well-spoken, well-regarded. He is going to be running for the Liberals. And there are others as well. The rector of Sherbrooke University is going to be running for the Liberals. So these are what is known as, high-profile candidates. And Robert Libman wrote a piece in the Gazette on this. And I heard him on this morning with Andrew, so I thought if you did not hear it, I want to play this for you. It begins with the question of this idea of a high-profile, a star candidate. What are we defining that as exactly? And what is the significance of it? And again, I'm talking from the Liberal perspective here, but obviously it applies across the board. Here's what he said.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.
Well, I think a star candidate, someone that's a well-known figure that's made a mark in a certain field or profession, someone that people know, someone that has name recognition, ideally in sectors that are important to voters, like healthcare, someone prominent in the healthcare sector, education sector, or an economist. Certainly during these times when those issues are top of mind among voters, I think it's important to bring in heavyweights from those sectors, which sends quite a message. It's symbolic that a political party that can attract prominent individuals is considered a winner, strong enough for someone with name recognition, someone of notoriety, to be able to put their life on hold and dive into the dog-eat-dog world of Quebec politics in order to run for that party. It shows a belief in that party and a belief in that leader. That's why I think it's very important for parties to be able to trot out some of these star candidates during a campaign. It sets a perception, it creates a bandwagon, and voters want to be able to see that they're competent individuals as part of a team that could be ready for governing.
Do these competencies that these star candidates have, gained during their careers in other fields, do they always translate to politics?
Well, I think in many cases it's hard to generalize. We've seen in the past in Quebec that prominent physicians have come in and tried to tinker with Quebec's healthcare system and have struggled enormously. We can think of Gaétan Barrette and a few others. Economists, too, come in with a lot of theories, and the reality of politics sometimes is not the easiest thing to solve economic issues within. So it doesn't always translate to that. But I think during a campaign, especially when you're trying to impress upon voters the ability to form a government and a cabinet and a team that can lead Quebec, it certainly sets an impression that you've got some heft around the future cabinet table, as opposed to a bunch of newcomers that won't know how to govern. The Liberals have also recruited Pierre Cossette, who's the former rector of the University of Sherbrooke. He was the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine. They've got David Bowles, who was the General Director of Charles Lemoyne. So an individual, which is a educational institution. So they're showing competencies in some of the key areas that voters are concerned about. And many people have criticized Charles Milliard and the Liberals so far for not doing enough to perhaps create an identity for himself in the party or not being visible enough. But he's been slowly putting together a very interesting, very competent team that during the election campaign, when voters are actually listening, he can trot out some of these names and show that, look, I've got individuals, experts in these fields to address some of the key issues that the Quebecers are concerned about. And that certainly is a reassuring impression that he can leave with voters. Voters are going to have very difficult. It's a very interesting election. You know, sovereignty and the lead of the PQ in the polls so far has been fairly consistent. But when push comes to shove and people are really looking at the main issues, he is able to say that I've got leaders in these fields, the fields that Quebec voters want us to deal with, and that'll be a very powerful message during the campaign. And he'll have that opportunity when he finally is under the bright lights of the campaign period, which really gets going in the next month or so.
What does that conversation sound like behind the scenes when somebody you're from a political party and you're approaching somebody who has a very good career already, and you're trying to convince them to go into politics, something that they're maybe not familiar with, and maybe for a lot less money than they're making now?
Well, I went through this personally about 35 years ago when I started the Equality Party. We needed some type of bump, and we tried to go after a few named candidates. I remember approaching George Springate at the time. He was very prominent, and he turned us down. We tried to get him to run in Westmount. He turned us down, but we offered him the opportunity. Here's a chance towards the end of your career to really stand up for your community. We approached Gordon Atkinson, and you remember Gordon Atkinson very, very well, a man of pride. And I remember the one thing that lit a fire under Gordon Atkinson was in the twilight of his career, here you can stand up and be a hero for your community and embark on a new adventure. And he loved the idea, and he actually ended up running for us. And then one other example, which goes to one of the points I was making in the column, that you can have a star candidate, but sometimes that can backfire. Richard Holden is someone we recruited in the Equality Party way back when. I'm sure you remember that name.
Sure, of course I do, yeah.
And he gave us instant credibility as a man with political experience, a man who went in the circles with Brian Mulroney and some other well-known political figures. And he really gave us credibility during the campaign, which helped the Equality Party perhaps gain some prominence. We won 4 seats. But then, as you know, he was the type of character who was very hard to manage. And a couple of years later, we certainly regretted having Richard Holden as part of our caucus because he was thrown out of our caucus and eventually joined the PQ. So there you go. You can have some top stars.
Right.
They can certainly give you instant credibility, but at the same time, it's up to the leader to really be careful at managing it. And that's one of the challenges that Milliard will have in this very impressive group of individuals that he'll be leading. But they've got to know that your party has the ability to win, because they don't want to come in and sit in opposition for the next 4 years. You've got to be able to provide them with an opportunity that they can be around the cabinet table. And if they do say yes, it's a sign from them that they believe that you have the ability to win this election, which translates to an impression you leave with voters.
Yeah, it's all about making that impression with voters. That's, again, Robert Libin on with Andrew Carter this morning talking about those Liberal star candidates. As I said, the PQ grabbed a couple as well, but I think, with respect to who the Liberals have gotten, Michel Leblanc, pretty good get. And it's interesting, too, when you consider, and he didn't name him, at least not in that part, talking about sometimes someone, comes from a field, like in the particular case of healthcare, and who's very well versed in it, then goes into politics, and it doesn't turn out to be the way you might have expected. He said, looking at Gaetan Barrette. So again, you might say the same about Christian Dubé, gone as well from that cabinet, right? So it's not always a guarantee, but as far as, people looking at it, when you're talking about bread and butter issues, the economy and healthcare and education, and you have people from within that sector who are respected in that sector, I think, and I was one of those people, we've had Charles Milliard on the show a couple of times, a little disappointed with the fact that he had not really gone out and sort of pitched or made a name or talked about, what the party was doing. Then all of a sudden, here we are getting closer to an election in October, and now we're finally starting to see the wheels turn. So I think if you're concerned about, the Parti Québécois, who, by the way, from what I understand, in the most recent poll are still leading, right, voter intention, this is a good thing, I think, right, for Charles Milliard to have these people out there. And I know he said he'd be going across the province, as all the leaders now are. All the pictures I see that are posted on social media have, whether it's Christine Fourchette or whether it's Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, traveling across the province. It's getting serious now, and it will over the next few weeks, of course. It's going to be very interesting to see as the polls go, or polls show, who's doing better. There was a quote today, Christine Fourchette, because the CAQ did not do well. They fell in the last poll. She said, the standard answer, I don't pay attention to the polls. I pay attention to the people who come up and say hello to me. Okay. Yeah, I've never heard that before. Anyway, we shall see. But as I said, I think good news if you're hoping that the Liberals do have a shot in this provincial election. Obviously, it's still pretty early, but yeah, I think these are good moves. 3-7.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Feeling out of the loop? Get into it.
Get into it.
Montreal Now with Aaron Rand.
CJAD 800.
Welcome back. So this is a cool story. And I know we have talked in the past. Our producer, Brian Callister, had a chance to go to some U.S. Baseball stadiums past couple of summers, right? And you always find every stadium kind of has a different, food that you don't find at other places. I think Toronto's made a big deal about this, right? They have hot dog nights at the Rogers Stadium, sometimes when the Blue Jays play, right? You had a couple of these large hot dog things, right?
Yeah.
And they cost a ton they're like $30.
Yeah, about like $30 for like a giant stadium hot dog.
Okay. That's just some of them have a lot of stuff on them. But now, ladies and gentlemen, there's good news. There's a hot new trend in the culinary world that involves, yes, the hot dog. But not just any hot dog. The familiar Frank, fabulously frosted with everything from pickled shallots to caviar, believe it or not. And that bill, if you want to get one of those, is $100 for your hot dog. Adam Chandler is the food columnist at the Wall Street Journal, where the story appeared, and he is on the line. Adam, thanks for taking the time today.
Always happy to talk hot dogs.
Yeah, and who isn't? Let me begin by asking, how many of these have you actually had a chance to eat, to taste? Any?
Well, unfortunately, I did not get the $100 golden glizzy, as it was called. It was only served in Miami at a couple of major sporting events. But they're bringing it back at some point. So my hope is to go there. I did have a caviar hot dog last week, though, and it was actually better than you would think.
No. Now, when you say you had one, if it's not at this event, the one what is it, the golden glizzy? Is that what it's called?
That's what it's called.
Where did you have a caviar hot dog?
The Museum of Modern Art in New York is one of the places that serves one of these high-scale, highbrow, upscale hot dogs at one of their restaurants inside the museum. And so that's the one with the pickled shallots and the caviar, and they're mini hot dogs. And honestly, better than I thought it was going to be. I love hot dogs. I don't have a big taste for caviar historically, but I understood how the two went together, and it actually kind of blew my mind.
Wow. Now, you said mini, so these are in essence, just like a half a hot dog, that size, or the whole hot dog?
These were two small mini hot dogs, so okay. they probably equated to about a half a hot dog, and they were still $39 all in. So it was a lot of money for a little bite, but it was very decadent. So I don't know if I could have had more than that.
So you're talking 2 bites is what you're talking about, basically. Right? If they're the minis.
Exactly.
Okay. And I will point out to our listeners, by the way, that's $39 American dollars. That's like a $50 hot dog if you were paying in Canadian money, just saying. Look, is this in fact becoming a trend outside of the one you mentioned in Miami, which they served at the Grand Prix, I think, right? Are you starting to see this more and more where restaurants or, people even at fairs are starting to simply take the hot dog and say, you know what, it's really not about the dog, it's about everything else you put on it?
That is a trend we're seeing. It is people are looking for things that are familiar and approachable and accessible. Everyone knows what a hot dog is. Everyone likes hot dogs, generally speaking. And so any chance you can make a splash by doing something outrageous with a hot dog, whether it's at a baseball game with an enormous hot dog that requires its own carrying case because you can't carry it in your hands, or by adding caviar or gold flakes or all kinds of really impressive and decadent toppings to it, it's a way for fancier businesses to kind of seem approachable. And there's some meaning to that.
It's interesting as you say this, I think to myself, there's so many hamburger chains in America, right? And they all do fairly well. Are there any hot dog chains?
There aren't a lot of hot dog chains. It's funny. I had the beautiful chance to live in Rosemont in Montreal last year, and I was right near La Petite, Quebec, where I would walk my dog a few times a day, just past past the restaurant and just see people eating hot dogs all the time. And I wondered, why don't we have this in the States? There are places that serve hot dogs, but again, it usually is the hamburger. It usually is the default of being what people order more of. And I think it's just because hot dogs have a negative association with them for everyday consumption. I think people are a little bit wary of eating hot dogs every day, even though if I could get away with it, I would.
Yeah, well, you know that line. Where's that from? The U.S. University study that said every hot dog you eat takes 30 minutes off your life?
Right, exactly.
Which might explain why people don't want to necessarily eat it. But you know what? It's funny because even though we know they're not good for you necessarily, I will point out my late dad used to work in a hot dog factory. And when you're on the production line, I'm not sure that it's this way now, but it was when he was alive, the line never stopped. If something fell, you picked it up and you put it back in the thing that went into the hot dog. So he never ate a hot dog again after that. But there are gourmet hot dogs though, right?
There are definitely gourmet hot dogs now, and that's something that I think is sort of what's giving people a little bit more permission to kind of indulge in these really, really fancy hot dogs, is the thought that, okay, well, this one has, this one is 100% beef, or this one has comes from a farm that has a name that's more familiar to me than just a huge conglomerate. So I think there is some positive movement on the hot dog front in that way. But, at the end of the day, it's still ultra processed. So you will always have people who say it's terrible for you and you shouldn't eat it. Yeah.
I wonder, too, a restaurant, never mind the ones that are special at events, the ones we've been talking about, but you wonder if restaurants would be adding or consider adding, given it's become popular again, hot dogs, dressed up hot dogs, if you will, onto restaurant menus in general.
Exactly. That is some of what we're seeing. Is we're seeing finer restaurants with white napkins and silverware adding hot dogs to their menus, even just seasonally, because they know people want that. They know it makes them happy. Even at a nice restaurant, you'll often see a hamburger on the menu, and I think hot dogs are kind of entering that realm as a way to be playful and to be unpretentious. Even if you are a place that still also serves $150 steak. There's something meaningful about having an item on the menu that everyone kind of knows and associates with innocence, childhood, summers, sporting events, whatever it is.
I wonder, too, if you're eating a hot dog that's expensive, is it a knife and fork kind of a deal? Does anyone do that?
That's a good question. I still think you got to get thrown out of the restaurant if you try to eat it with a knife and fork.
I think you should, too. Agreed.
Yeah, that's my take.
If you had to, I got to wrap up. If you had to pick a restaurant, you're in New York, right?
Yes.
What's the best place in New York to get a hot dog, other than, on the street from a vendor?
Other than on the street from a vendor, Katz's Deli, they're known for their pastrami, they're known for their corned beef, but they have a really, really good hot dog, and I think that it's something that a lot of people who visit New York miss.
Good point. All right, for people who are going. Adam, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Take good care. There you go. Food columnist for the Wall Street Journal. The rise of the $100 hot dog. By the way, that $100 hot dog, and there's a picture of it, the people who put it together point out that there's so much caviar. The tin of caviar that they use is $120. So you're really getting a pretty good deal for $100 for your fancy hot dog. 3:30, we have news coming up next.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.
Hear all the latest news and have your say. This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand on CJAD 800.
Welcome back. So we're finding out not good news as far as Urgence Santé and, basically paramedic workers around the province are concerned. When I say the province, I should be specific because apparently it is Montreal and Laval where the issue remains. Now, paramedics here have been without a collective agreement for more than 3 years. And then earlier, apparently, there was an announcement by paramedic unions that a tentative agreement with Quebec had been reached until we find out that no, That doesn't apply across the whole province because, again, Montreal and Laval have rejected that offer. So Hal Newman is a journalist with The Last Ambulance. We've spoken before. He's a former paramedic. Hal, thanks for coming on. Let me ask, first of all, with respect to, you read a headline that says a tentative agreement has been reached, and you're thinking, great, finally done. And then you find out it's not really across the board. So what's going on here?
So it's important to, hey, Aaron, thanks for having me on. So it's important to recognize that there are 4 different unions across Quebec, and that the paramedics who work at Urgence Santé are represented by the Syndicat Préhospitalier, which is part of the CSN. And yeah, they voted 60-40 against the entente, the agreement in principle. However, that's not a done deal in terms of a rejection because they're part of a larger bloc. So the SP, the Syndicat Préhospitalier, that union, its voting won't end until the end of this week. And that'll be really interesting for a number of reasons. If the urban paramedics reject the entente, but the rural paramedics around the rest of Quebec who are part of that union accept it, that'll be an interesting scenario.
Yeah, to which my next question might be, then what? I mean, if that's the case, if that's how it plays out, we don't have a deal.
No, and the other 3 unions, 2 of them are actually, they're all in negotiations. No one has signed off on this agreement in principle. And one union, the FPHQ, which is also a fairly large bloc, they're not in negotiations at all with the government. They want a retirement program, or basically, as I was explaining to your producer before, is that so paramedics, unlike police officers or firefighters who work 25 years and then can take full retirement, or nurses who work 35 years and then can take full retirement, paramedics work until you die. There's no you work until you're 65, and if you're a paramedic, no one makes it to 65. And if you retire before that, then you retire with a penalty. So the FPHQ wants a 35 years service and then retirement kind of equity with the healthcare sector. And so they're not even in negotiations at this point.
Okay, there's a lot sort of in play here as you describe it now. So no, that's fine. I'm trying to understand that. I think people might be alarmed to find out. If you're working as a paramedic, you said at 65 and no one lasts that long. I mean, is it fair to ask why that's the case?
Sure, it's a really rugged job. I haven't been on the road for a little while now, for more than 5 years. It's a young person's vocation, calling. I mean, it's really rugged work in terms of just the physical side. There's a lot to ensure that your skills and your mental acuity are there, and then there's the enormous stress load, right? The stress of calls and the stress of irregular shifts, and especially if you're an Urgence Santé or an urban medic in Quebec City, Hull, Gatineau, Sherbrooke, Saint Jerome, you're doing high volumes of calls. And that's an enormous load on your system. And so, yeah, it's rare actually. I get together with some paramedics from the old days, kind of the old guard, right, we call ourselves, and the group's dwindling, and we're not that old. Mm-hmm. I'm 66.
Look, I'm hearing you say this. First of all, I'm sure people understand this is, difficult work to begin with. But are you telling me that if you did this as your career for your entire life, you decided to retire, you're basically left out, you're there to dry, you're hung out to dry?
Yeah, so I'll give you a good friend who I'm sure won't mind me mentioning his name. just an absolutely brilliant paramedic, a guy named Rick Daly. He put in 44 years on the streets in Montreal. I mean, they should rename a major street for him. But his pension is peanuts, and it's just brutal. And so if I had stayed in and I didn't have a plan B, if I didn't have a journalism career, I'd be finding all kinds of odd jobs.
Wow. All right. So I guess,
Aaron, I just want to mention that a couple of paramedics called me because they found a guy dumpster diving in a downtown alley, and he had an old Urgence Santé jacket. So they said to him, because they were a little bit upset, and they said, where'd you get that jacket? And he started crying and said he was an old paramedic.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well,
brutal.
I had no idea, and I don't think most people do until you just brought this up. I will ask, though, Hal, with respect to, if we move further, 3 years is a long time in this kind of a job to, be still trying to hammer out a contract. Is this, you're pointing out some of what happens with respect to pensions and stuff. Is the main issue here money or overtime or hours? What is it?
So it's a combination. So it's pension, it's improved working conditions. It's definitely an improvement in remuneration and in pay. The agreement in principle called for I think it was 17%, but over 7 years. I mean, it's a very minuscule, percentage per year. It was a 7-year agreement that was proposed, which is wild when you look at, in the public safety sector of Quebec, all the other unions managed to get the same terms, but within 5-year deals.
Right.
I would have thought that the CAC going into an election, obviously, that they would have gone with some type of transformative agreement that would have finally put, Quebec's EMS system on par for conditions kind of like in Toronto or Ottawa or Peel region, which is just outside of Toronto, or BC, who just settled with their paramedics. But it's same old here. Same old.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that that there's actually a pay cut at the highest echelon for paramedics.
So maybe it's not fair to me ask you if you're hopeful, at least, that something may come of this. They're starting to negotiate tentative agreement. Turns out not to be an agreement, but are you seeing signs that, the government's willing to finally get down and do something here?
No, I like I said, I was hoping. I was hoping that there would be some type of major deal.
Yeah.
It was Premier Frechette who actually announced that the tentative deal on her Facebook page. So I was thinking, wow, if the Premier is weighing in, finally it's something worthwhile. But, but all the voting's not in yet. So let's just see how it plays out. But for right now, know that the paramedics who are represented by the union who work at Urgence Santé, they've rejected it.
Okay. I'm going to run out of time. I did want to ask one thing as you lay this out and talk about how difficult it is and, the stress on the job. Is one of the issues here, and maybe I'm wrong, that fewer people, as they find this out, actually want to take these jobs?
Sure. One of the, very quickly, the average career expectancy for a paramedic in Quebec is about 5 years now. So we spend 3 years training paramedics. We get them on the street, and then about into their 5th year, they wake up one morning and go, "What the hell did I think?"
Yeah.
And they're moving on, and then we have to start the process again.
Sad to hear that. Listen, I wish you luck, and I think most people obviously appreciate the work that you do, that all paramedics do, and it'd be nice if the government kind of woke up to the fact and said, okay, let's at least be on par, as you said, with some of the other provinces here and get this behind us. So, Hal, I wish you luck, and I thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron.
Take good care. You too. Hal Newman. Former paramedic, and again, this tentative deal, not a done deal yet, but they have another week and a half, I think, left to vote. 3:40.
Canadian women are looking for more more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
All right, let's take a look at the story that we started the show by asking you today what you thought about this. And basically my question was, is it about time now, given these new threats, these new tariff threats from the U.S., that Canada actually started considering making concessions? And I think it's fair to say overwhelmingly, from what I heard and what you've texted and called, the answer is no. Which is not much different from the first time this was asked about a month ago, when these concessions, or these tariffs rather, were not even in play. They just came up recently at the end of July when Donald Trump brought them up. Michael Serapio is the CTV News National Ottawa correspondent on this story today. Michael, thanks for taking the time. And let me begin by first of all pointing out that if I understand this correctly, the Prime Minister has already hinted, and I know they're discussing this now, that they are ready to make concessions, right?
They are ready to make concessions, but it's not as if they're only going to make a concession and not expect anything in return. And I think that's an important part of this because, concession itself can be a loaded word. It sounds like giving up. But is it a quid pro quo where you give something in order to get access to other things? And this is what the government is weighing, bearing in mind what you are hearing from your listeners, because I got to say, poll after poll does tell us that Canadians don't really want to give in to Donald Trump. They want a very tough pro-Canada, anti-Trump stance on this one, and there is a level of fatigue because it's not as if this is the first tariff threat from Donald Trump, although this is pretty much a big nuclear option when you say 50% on Canadian exports, upwards of $28 billion on various sectors. So it's pretty wide-ranging, but also very deliberate on the American side in order to bring Canada back to the table and to basically threaten them with a sledgehammer if they don't deliver. And right now, the concessions that Ottawa is thinking about, that CTV has been able to confirm, not through the government but through industry sources, are things like auto tariffs against the U.S., American booze back onto Canadian shelves, and others are reporting possible dairy. But that would be to address other things like the tariffs by the U.S. on Canadian lumber, steel, aluminum, and cars. So that's where we're at right now, and certainly a political tightrope for the Prime Minister, Aaron.
I want to just point out one other thing, right? Because, as they say, the devil is in the details here. Whatever concessions are made, whatever Canada decides is okay, for us if we get something back, this is not about, and I think the U.S. administration has made this abundantly clear, it's not about getting rid of tariffs. Not in general. That idea is sticking around. That's central to the Donald Trump, administration, if you will. This is about maybe getting reductions of some kind. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's very accurate. And I'll go to the point of what we're hearing from not only Donald Trump, but members of his administration, and that includes Jameson Greer, who is the United States Trade Representative. He just testified before the U.S. Senate Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago, and he says they are still and will be committed to tariffs because for them, it helps reindustrialize America, and they also acknowledge that it puts money into the coffers of the American Treasury. So tariffs is something that they want, even though there's a lot of pushback to it. And in terms of where that leaves Canada, there is still this desire, we should get free trade access. But I don't know how realistic that is, given what we've heard time and again from U.S. administration. And even for Canadian businesses, we look at the jobs numbers in Canada. We've actually seen job growth in this country. And part of that is eventually things get normalized. And if it is a tariff rate that can keep Canadian companies competitive and be able to plan going forward, well, that might be better than getting a huge tariff by giving no concessions, as the argument goes. And also, if it's a low enough tariff that allows Canadian businesses to thrive, it also gives this country time to diversify, because there are diversification efforts underway right now, but it's going to take a few years before they come into play.
So one of the issues here is this whole question of supply management. We had some people call up and saying, you know what, this is one of the things most important to the U.S. from what they'd read. Again, this is a case of not getting, I think the Prime Minister has basically come out and said, you know, supply management is not going away. Mm-hmm. There may be some concessions made as to rates or reductions, but that's about as far as we're prepared to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can only take the Prime Minister for his word, right? And that was just a few days ago. He recommitted to supply management. And it's probably what we've seen in the past, because all we can really do is listen to what officials say, believe it until they prove otherwise to us, and look to the past. And when we look at when NAFTA was renegotiated to become CUSMA under Justin Trudeau in the first Trump administration, well, the result of that was more American dairy in terms of quota in the Canadian marketplace. So I don't think you're going to see a wholesale abandonment of supply management, because Canadians acknowledge the benefit of that, not only to the Canadian dairy supply, but also to give a livable wage to Canadian farmers. But it is that American quota that you got to be looking at in terms of details, as you say, the devil being in the details.
I want to just bring up one other thing, and I brought this up when I first asked the question. And again, this goes back to before Donald Trump announced these tariffs. This whole idea of the U.S. alcohol, ban, which was not on the radar, I don't think, for the U.S. administration early on. But then we started reading about what some areas in the U.S. are going through because of this. The losses are in the hundreds of millions. Some would say even, in the billions of dollars. California, parts of New York states that actually are in this business. Now, all of a sudden, Donald Trump mentioned this specifically the other day. And I'm wondering, too, if that's going to be a decision that is, or one of the concessions that's going to be up for debate. We know that it's under provincial jurisdiction. It's not like Mark Carney can simply say, well, here's what we're going to do in Canada, and everybody will follow. Does that pose a bit of a hurdle?
Does it pose a bit of a hurdle? I will say that when I've attended the First Ministers' conferences, there's been great cooperation amongst the First Ministers. So it might be a case where, okay, you can put American liquor on the shelves, and that's essentially as much as the provinces can do, because at the end of the day, Canadians will have to be willing to go back and buy that liquor. Right. And there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Look at Canadian travel into the United States for leisure travel. That's not a government policy. That is a grassroots Canadian effort, and that's having a huge impact. So much so that Donald Trump's getting an earful not only from border states, but also from California and Florida that are reliant on Canadian tourism. So will it be a hurdle? I think at the end of the day, if it can create some Canadian access, you'll probably see greater cooperation around the First Minister's table, and then it goes to the Canadian public, and Canadians can decide what they're willing to put up with Donald Trump and how they're going to change their consumer habits, if at all, in response to it.
Last question that I would ask would simply be, and someone posed this question in a text message to me, even if we did make these concessions, what guarantee do we have that the Americans would actually follow through, i.e. Donald Trump?
Yeah, none. Quite frankly, none. He's gone back on CUSMA, right? A lot of this stuff is a violation of CUSMA, the deal that he negotiated because he thought NAFTA was such a horrible deal. But in terms of predictability for the Canadian economy, for investment, for people's day-to-day, it's, some predictability is better than no predictability is what you're going to hear from them. And in terms of guarantees in the future, well, there is no guarantee in the future, not even for Donald Trump. Yeah. There is a U.S. midterm in November. Trump is doing poorly in the polls. His economic record's coming into question. The tariffs and the impact on the American economy is putting certain states that should be Republican strongholds into play. So there is no guarantee of any future deal, but there's also no guarantee of the political forces that will make an influence on that type of trade policy in the United States.
We'll leave it at that. Michael, appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
No worries, Aaron. Take care.
Michael Serapio, CTV News. We're going to talk tariffs. I'm going to ask you what you think when we come back. That's in the next half hour. Stay with us.
Montreal Now is brought to you by Dormez-vous. Get serious about sleep at Dormez-vous with up to 20% off mattresses, pillows, sheets, and more. Limited time only. Restrictions apply.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers.
I think we need something new.
Discover iHeart New Music. Always fresh, always first. Stream now on the free iHeartRadio app.
You're listening to the voice of Montreal.
News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
An iHeartRadio station.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Brian Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.